Race fans, it's time to buckle in and listen to the fastest hour in racing radio. Your driver is a multi-time NASCAR winner and Hall of Famer Mark Martin. We cover racing, grassroots, history, we bench race, we talk life, and most importantly, we smash the loud pedal. It's time to turn some laps on the Mark Martin Podcast.
Episode number 35 of the Mark Martin Podcast, and we're going to roll into the year 1993. But before we do that, make sure to head on over to the website, markmartinpod.com, markmartinpod.com. Listen to the old archives, get your listening links, and subscribe to your favorite podcast player. Make sure to give us that 5-star rating. But Mark, the year 1993, you went streaking that year. Let's talk about 1993.
Yeah, well, you know, if you've been listening to 91 and 92, you can hear some increasing frustration by really all of us, you know, with the 6 car, you know, and I've had certainly some increasing frustrations with several different aspects, you know, you know, we peaked in 1990 in our performance, and going forward from 90, 91, and 92, we were continued to be extremely consistent, but we weren't quite as competitive, you know, on the racetrack as we wanted. We're super competitive, you know, but not winning races, I would say. Super consistent, and, you know, but not as fast as we really wanted to be 91, 92 after 1990. And so that was building a little bit of frustration for us in that standpoint. And of course, you know, you've heard me mention that, you know, some of my, you know, a little bit about my relationship with Jack. You know, we, going into 93, I did not feel like Jack trusted me to be, you know, I didn't feel like he knew me to the core, and I didn't feel like he trusted me, you know, to the core. And, you know, sort of, you know, he and Jeff Smith, Jeff was really who I was beginning to had begun to deal with on contracts and a lot of things like that. He was president of Roush Racing, and so and Jeff was an attorney, and he worked in good faith. I didn't use an attorney on my contracts. I used him. I mean, I used him to do the things. When I would get a contract from him, I'd read the contract and tell him what, you know, what I was concerned about, what I didn't like, or whatever. And we would work through those things, and therefore we wouldn't have any issues when it came to Jack and I. You know, it was a good setup, a good situation. Even though, you know, I still wasn't being paid anywhere near market value or treated or valued. I didn't feel like, you know, my market value was. It was a good arrangement. I never had any problems with Jeff. Jeff was a good, smooth guy. He did a great job of selling his point, you know, from a race team standpoint of where we were. And so, that being said, we, you know, 92 and 91 had not been a particularly satisfying performance season for me, and the pressure was building on me. You know, all my buddies were, you know, had good-looking deals that were better deals than what I felt like my deal was. And, you know, I respected Robin Pemberton's job and Steve Mills' job. I was honored to work with such smart, brilliant people and such good people. But at the same time, no one likes to be told what to do. So, I was adjusting to being out of control of my, a 100% control of, the definition of what my cars would be. I had a lot of input, all the input really that I wanted. Uh, but it was a different time in my career where I wasn't the guy telling, people how to hang the bodies and where to do this and that. Steve and I still sit down and talked about what setup we were going to go to every racetrack, and I had 100% input on what springs and shocks and bars, and that all worked fine. But when it came to the working of the shop, it wasn't I wasn't because I wasn't there every day. It wouldn't have been a good thing for me to be the boss of things, if you know what I'm saying. I'm starting to do, more press, more media stuff, more commercial stuff, more appearances, and all those kinds of things. And it was pulling me away. And it was Steve and Robin's job to define, what the cars really were. And I was having to adjust to that. And it wasn't a comfortable adjustment. And we weren't running as good as we wanted to be. So, that was a negative force on it. And I'm saying all this because I feel like that an important factor that most people don't know about what we went through in '93 before later in the season having a very triumphant run was that we went to Sonoma, which was always, May, June-ish, and I had just had it. I was just frustrated out of my mind. And Jack and I went to dinner, and I finally got the balls up to tell Jack that I didn't want to drive for him anymore. And of course, I had a contract that went 3 more years, which, like I said before, I never got closer than 2.5 years to an end of a contract. And that was smart business on Jack and Jeff Smith's side, very smart. And it was also, that was on me because I always wanted to take the fresh deal that sweetened the pot. So I was always, willing to sign up for that. Well, it would always seem like it always came after we were on a nice little roll. We won races, and been running good too. So anyway, I got the balls finally to tell Jack I didn't want to be there anymore. And he's like, why? And I told him, because I can't. Because I can't get the bodies on my cars like I want them. And he's like, well, why? And I said, because, the guys in the shop say that you can't do it. You can't lower the roofs on these cars. We were running a roof height. They had a quarter panel height rule of 35 and 36 across the back, 35 left rear, 36 right rear. And the roof height minimum was 50.5 inches. Well, we were running our cars at 51.5, 51 3/8, maybe every once in a while 51.25. And we were doing that so that you could close the hood, you could put a motor in it with a carburetor on it, with a carburetor spacer on it, and close the hood. And I think that Robin and Steve both assumed that you couldn't go to Jack, the engine guy, and tell him, hey, we want to take the carburetor spacer off your motor. And you can't lower the motor because they're already at, 10.5 or less. Of course, my guys were fantastic about it, trying to get the engine through, lower than 10 inches, which was the rule and all that. But anyway, we couldn't do it. And like if it would have been my shop in a backyard garage, I would have hung the body max out. 50.5 roof height, 35, 36, and that some bitch had been raked out of its mind. And then when I got the body hung on it, I would have slid a motor in it, and I would have figured out a way. I wouldn't have given a damn what it took. Well, no one imagined that Jack would have been the same way. You know, we didn't know Jack still. We've been, what are we in our 5th season together? And Jack's like, well, the engine is secondary. And of course, the engine was primary to Jack all the time, it seemed like, because that's what his love was engines, and always had been. But we had misjudged that. And he's like, no, we're gonna do that. And so we ran a race at Sonoma, and Tuesday after Sonoma, every Tuesday, Jack came from Michigan down to the shop, and every Tuesday, and we're going to tell the team what's going to go down. So we get up there, and Jack tells them that they hadn't been doing enough, and that we're going to do these bodies like Mark says he wants them, and this is all about Mark, and you guys have worked harder for him when in 1987 when you used to go over there at night and work on his stuff than you are right now, which was pretty rough for those guys to take. But to be real honest with you, the race team, we had all gotten comfortable. Comfortable meaning, not working nights, late nights, regularly, and the kinds of things that you had to do back then to win races. Back then, you just had to do that. And it was true. In 1987, many of those guys that worked there would come by my old shop there in Randleman at night and volunteer help, because there was only 2 or 3 of us running a full bush schedule. And yet they weren't staying at night ever to, cut these bodies off and drop them down. So everybody was pissed. The whole shop was pissed. Now, I'm sure they were pissed at me. I'm sure they were pissed at Jack. No one ever at this point really understood Jack. We're five years in. The guy was hard to get to know, and was a little bit cold, and we were all scared of him. And as we go on forward in these podcasts, you'll learn that Jack becomes a very warm person, very caring person, caring to a fault, and loyal to a fault, meaning you could be doing a hell of a terrible job, and Jack would stay with you way, 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 way too long because he was loyal like that. But we weren't to that point yet in 93. So the guys started cutting bodies off of race cars and hanging them at 50 and 5/8 and taking the carburetor spacers off so that the hood would close on the motor. And so we go to Watkins Glen, and of course, we've got our new body location on the car, and Steve had, Steve and the guys had built they had taken a road race car that we had and really lightened it up. Man, they cut a bunch of structural stiffness out of the car as well, just cut tubing out of it. And it was a flexi flyer. I remember that the hood wouldn't close on the hood pins or wouldn't very well when the car was jacked up on jack stands. It was built to sit on the weight on the ground, and I guess it must flex when it was raised up on jack stands or something, and the hood pins kind of moved or something. So yeah, it was amazing freaking car. This thing was so stupid fast in practice. It was unbelievable. And then, but we didn't really know how fast we really were until we rolled it out to qualify. And we absolutely murdered the track record and the competition. It was unbelievable how fast we ran. So that was amazing race for us. We went to the back of the pack. I can't tell you how many times. It seemed like we rounded. Robin was changing the rear tires, and he had a lug nut round off on one of the rear tires. I'm thinking it was the right rear, but I can't remember for sure. And it rounded off, and he couldn't get it off. And we pitted, and we pitted, and we pitted, and we'd make our way back up. And for a while, I don't think he changed the right rear tire on multiple stops, or whichever rear tire it was. But eventually, at the end, we made our way from the back up to third, and I could see Earnhardt and Kyle Petty, and we were catching them. I mean, we were mowing them down like you wouldn't believe, but the race was about over, and Earnhardt and Kyle tangled up in front of me and took them out. We went on to win that race. So we had some horrible bad luck, but we had a little bit of good luck there as well. And then we just kept on mowing, man. We went to Michigan with this car, with the body on it, and that thing, it was unbelievable. We were unbelievable fast there as well. I remember getting behind cars on the straightaway and having the car buffet and pick up major speed, more than we were used to seeing, because we were used to a lower drag, lower downforce body, and this thing was significantly more drag and more downforce. On a 2-mile racetrack, some people didn't think that you could make that work, but it's all, Michigan is all about the corners, man. You're in the corner forever, and we knew that. I knew that. I knew that the only place that you had to take drag over downforce in consideration was Daytona and Talladega, with, the restrictor plate choking the thing down to 400 horsepower on 2.5-mile racetrack. So anyway, we smoked them. There, went on to Bristol, and same thing. Just really incredible team effort. Man, we were rolling on a roll, riding a wave, and won Bristol, and then we went to Darlington for the Southern 500, and had a great race there as well, and won that one. That made it 4 in a row. And I remember, just it was like everybody was just standing with their mouth open looking, couldn't believe, that we'd strung this string together, and got in a car to drive home with Arlene. And I remember feeling, it all felt kind of surreal, like it really hadn't happened, because it had come at a time, and I think you could go back and look at the records, but if I'm not mistaken, I had won 2 Busch races and an IROC race in this string. So I think at this point we had won like the last 7 races that I'd buckled up in a row, all within 4 weeks. It was a crazy roll that we were on, and we went to Richmond. And halfway through that race, we were leading the race so easy that I couldn't even see second place. And I knew I was going to get in trouble for, dominating that bad. So I'm out there leading the race, running half throttle. And this is the truth, half throttle all the way down the straightaways. We were so good, and couldn't even see second place. It looked like we were going to make it 5 in a row. And as the race started to wind down, in the night race, and the track started changing, I couldn't feel the change in my car that much, but we went from being, that fast to, I think, finishing fifth or something like that. So it seemed like the competition got a whole lot better, later on in the race, and we didn't really have a glaring problem, and it didn't really seem like, maybe we need to be freed up. I don't know, but anyway, we didn't pull it off, but still a great showing, and just really, really a great year. And then, of course, the next to last race of the season is Phoenix, and that's where 3 years back we had essentially lost our championship by losing those points and not running well there, finishing 10th. And we go there, and it seems like, if I remember correctly, we either sat on the pole or were second. I remember Trickle was on the front row with us, and it seemed like Trickle got the lead at the start, but I got right by him. We had a hell of a race, and it seems like I had one hell of a race with Ernie Irvin, if this is the race that I'm thinking. But we won that race as well. And what's significant about winning that race is, so back in the summer we start rehanging these bodies, and so we need us a car for Phoenix, and we had retired JR10. JR10 was the first Laughlin car that we built, and if you go back to 1989, I talk about that. In 1989, I get my first Cup win with JR10 front steer car. Well, we had retired this thing because the guys are building new race cars all the time and building them better and better. And so we had retired JR10, which had won multiple races for us. I don't know exactly how many, but of the 35 I won with Roush, I'm going to guess we won five or so times with JR10. So anyway, we pull out JR10, or the guys do. They pull it out of the back of the shop where it's parked and retired, cut the body off of it, and hang a body on it to go to Phoenix with. And so that thing won again. JR10 did at Phoenix. So yeah, that was an amazing car, and that car sits in the museum in Batesville at the Ford dealership on display. It was. I would like to know. I wish Steve Mill or someone could figure out exactly how many times we won with that car. But that was the second time we had brought that chassis out of retirement and won with it, if I recall correctly. So that was one of those cars we just couldn't get rid of. But it did eventually wind up in the museum. So it was amazing second half of the season for us, for sure.
Not only was it amazing second half in the Cup side, now I did go back and look at the Busch side at that time with the Winn-Dixie car, but you had 5 in a row in the Busch series: Michigan, Darlington, Richmond, Charlotte, Rockingham, all around that same time.
Oh yeah, we were rolling. We had that Winn-Dixie car, humming at full song, for sure. It was that program was really, really on track. But everything I touched at this time was really unbelievable. If you'll look up the IROC 1993 IROC stats, I would be surprised if I didn't win the championship in IROC this year. And every time, I would win when you had to practice the IROC car or you had to start last, one or the other. And you also, High Point started last every race. And so I was typically always first 2 or 3 in points. So I was starting the back anyway. So sometimes I wouldn't practice, or sometimes I'd go over and make 2 laps before, in one of the practice cars, just to satisfy them, because they were all wigged out that I wouldn't practice. I didn't need to practice, It was just everything I strapped in was just golden right now. This was you know, the golden time of my career. I had struggled and fought and scratched and clawed all those years through that pain and agony through 1982 to really to 93. And it really didn't turn magic until halfway through 93, although, I had lots of great times. And 1990 was a great time, but we did what we did in 1990 partially based on consistency rather than dominance. We put some ass whippings on them in 93, and pretty much everything I strapped in, we were laying it down. So it was incredible.
What's it like to go to a track every week when you know you're that fast? Is the pressure building as the wins pile up, as you go to these different tracks?
Not really. It's just really cool because, all your competition is timing you. We didn't have live timing and scoring back then. So crew chiefs and they would be timing who they thought the guy was to beat, them and the crew guys and stuff. And all eyes would be on us, of course, and Earnhardt and of course Rusty and whoever, but we were typically one of the ones that everybody kept tabs on because I was an incredible qualifier. That was always one of my strong suits. We could pull laps out of a hat, like even when we weren't running good, we could pull a rabbit out of the hat for qualifying a lot of times. Qualifying was something that I really, really, really enjoyed doing. I loved it. I loved the intensity. I loved the anxiety of it. I loved rolling out onto the racetrack and pushing the car to the point where I didn't really know if I was going to make it or not. Didn't really know if I was going to wreck it or not. And pull off something that was just beyond your expectations or anyone's expectations. That was just that was a thrill for me. I was really liked qualifying, and I thrived at it, and really had that was really good. That was really good for me.
So at that time in the early 90s, NASCAR was taking off, blowing up on, at the track and on TV. Tell us about the heyday. Tell us about when NASCAR was really in its glory days at that point.
Yeah, we're really one of the certainly top 5 drivers on the circuit in every respect, in competition, on track performance. Souvenir sales went insane during this period. Endorsement deals started to come. Jack and Jeff Smith began to let me do a little bit more endorsement deals, although they were always very restrictive. But that was another thing. Like, I was no Earnhardt. But, Earnhardt, he got, I don't know, I thought he got, probably didn't, but I thought he got like all the royalties, off of his souvenir sales. Man, at Roush Racing, there again, I got beat up. I got 4/9, or a little over 2/3, or a little over 1/3 of the souvenir royalty money. So that was always kind of a rub, but it still was a huge amount of money, even at that. Valvoline got a piece of it, Ford got a piece of it, and of course Roush got a large piece of it, and I got a piece of it. But the souvenir royalty thing was insane during that time, and then mid to late 90s, it was unbelievable. You could make as much money from that as you could driving a race car, just about. But this is just this is the beginning of the glory years of NASCAR, or the golden age, where it went from grassroots racing, where Richard Petty and Bobby Allison and Cale Yarborough and David Pearson were racing in a southeastern sort of regional racing thing, good old grassroots racing, to certainly the golden age of commercialism. During this time in the mid 90s to the mid 2000s, that was an era when people could make some money in racing. Drivers, crew chiefs, good tire changers, and that kind of thing. The money was the sponsorship, the endorsement deals. The sponsorships were coming in to the race teams. They were growing leaps and bounds, and the race teams in turn were spending money like crazy. And it really transformed the sport because they had so much more money to put toward being competitive. I mean, I remember 1989, I think it was, Rusty. Yeah, it was for the season of 1989. It was the end of 1988. Rusty bragging to me, "Yeah, man, my sponsor next year got $1 million." So Rusty's sponsorship for 1989 for the full season was $1 million, and they won the championship on that. And now you can't run two races, three. You run a couple races on that. So. Things have really, really changed, but that's how much they've changed. 1989, the sponsorship for Rusty's championship run was $1 million from Kodiak.
That'll wrap up episode number 35 of the Mark Martin Podcast, year 1993. Again, hit the website, markmartinpod.com, markmartinpod.com. Make sure to subscribe and give us that 5-star rating.
Thank you for subscribing and listening to the Mark Martin Podcast. Remember to give us a 5-star rating in your app store. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Mark Martin POD. The Mark Martin Podcast is a production of the Accelerated Podcast Network.